So my goal over the next 15 minutes is kind of like what Howard just did with blockchain, provide some kind of introductory, strategic kind of analysis of augmented reality, but more importantly, how that kind of collides with local media, localized marketing for brands. So a quick bit about me. I'm a 14-year local media analyst, most of that time covering mobile, but in the last 2 years, really shifting my focus over to a lot of the emerging technologies that are gonna impact local and provide kind of new flavors of opportunity, everything from AR to VR to ML, CV, all of the fun acronyms, and blockchain. So I've kind of built this around kind of 5 kind of key points I want to walk through. The first one, really just to acknowledge, though I'm very bullish on it, AR, let's be honest, has been kind of overhyped. Similar to the level of hype we've seen around blockchain, as Howard just pointed out, throughout the kind of 2016 and 2017 hype cycle. We're still very bullish on it, but it's going to take a little bit longer. And the analogy I like to use is it's kind of like the circa 2001 e-commerce .com bubble, where the exuberance at that time, looking back, wasn't actually wrong. A lot of the kind of market sizing that we kind of did in that period was actually underestimated, but it was just very early, 3 to 5 years early in terms of a lot of that exuberance. That's kind of where I peg AR right now. Similarly, glasses are the kind of fully realized version of augmented reality as opposed to mobile devices. And we're similarly not there yet. That won't arrive until at least 2020. And a lot of us are pegging that as the kind of year, or 2021, as the time frame where Apple is going to come out with its glasses. And we have a lot of evidence to support that. And I'll get into that in a bit. But really, we're just not there yet. Culturally speaking, the cultural acclamation isn't there. The technology isn't there in terms of glasses being small enough and sleek enough for kind of consumer mass appeal. So in the meantime, we're seeing a lot of milestones with the shorter term opportunity, which is around mobile. And this was really vaulted forward when Google and Apple released their respective developer kits. So that allows any developer to build AR functionality and AR apps using the commodity hardware, or the zero-cost hardware, as I like to call it, because it's the phone you already own. And they've incentivized developers to do this by providing a distribution channel through the app stores, and then a massive installed base of devices, which is their addressable market, which today is about 762 million devices that are ARKit or ARCore compatible, growing to 3.4 billion by 2022, and that's simply a function of the hardware replacement cycle, which is about 2 years. So these compatible devices are going to cycle in really quickly and just provide a massive installed base, and that's kind of one of the basis of this opportunity. The third premise is that I think a lot of lessons can be gained about where this is all going and the business models that are materializing by looking at the top of the food chain. So I just put out a report that is about Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook, the big 4, and what they're all doing to kind of tackle AR. And one of the takeaways is they're going about this in vastly different ways, but there's a common thread that they're all doing in terms of their motivations, which are to protect or to boost or to pave the future path for their core businesses. So for Apple, what does that look like? Apple's core business is selling hardware. They're diversifying in a lot of ways. They're getting into software and services. There's iTunes and iCloud, but really the kind of their main cash cow remains hardware. So they're looking at AR as a way to really bolster that. And they're doing that in a few different ways. In the near term, they essentially want AR to make iPhones sexy again. So iPhones over the last several quarters have had decelerated sales growth, which is bound to happen with any maturing product. So they're really using AR along with a few other things, and we saw this at last week's Apple hardware event, to really kind of breathe new life into iPhone sales. They're also interested in getting AR out there in terms of getting consumers used to the use case and seeding the demand. And then also on the supply side with developers, getting that kind of learning curve kicked off, and so they can gain their native footing and really kind of start to gain their development chops around building AR experiences. And that's really pursuant to its longer-term strategy, again, maybe around 2020, 2021, of smart glasses. Now, Apple really believes, and they're kind of betting big on this, that the next evolution of mobile hardware is going to be this wearable form factor where information is delivered directly in your line of sight. And they're doing a lot. We can start to see some of the clues of that in their patent filings, in a lot of the acquisitions they've made over the last 18 months. And we and a lot of other analysts in the kind of AR space are pegging 2020, 2021 as kind of all of those clues leading up to in terms of Apple launching this. And we believe that's going to be a big moment because of Apple's ability to shift markets and the halo effect that they have. And they're really betting on this horse. Now, there's another wild card I always like to mention when talking about these future possibilities for Apple. Somewhere between that near-term and that long-term plan is what I like to call AR audio, which is instead of the way that we usually envision AR, which is graphical overlays on the physical world, information, contextualizing things we're looking at, the same version of that, but through an audio channel. And the benefit is that audio is more discrete, it's easier to absorb. I always like to joke that the original form of augmented reality was radio. You know, it augments our perception of the world as we're driving around or jogging or whatever you're doing. But what we're talking about here is a more kind of sophisticated and intelligent audio channel where it's guiding you through your day. Everything from walking directions to the person you're shaking hands with at a conference. You could picture LinkedIn developing that type of app in this environment. And that's just it. It's going to require a lot of software development, a lot of AI. But in the meantime, the first step is what Apple's working on, which is just seeding that hardware use case of conditioning kind of an all-day wearable. And it's already started to do that with AirPods. I'm wearing them right now. But the thing is, they're quiet most of the day unless the phone's ringing. But we're going to get to a point where there are opt-ins for different apps or layers of information of things I want to be notified about. Every time myself or my company is mentioned in the news, I get a very ambient, subtle whisper about that. Or every time I come within a mile of a Dick's Sporting Goods, I'm alerted to that fact, or whatever my affinities are as a consumer and the things I opt into. It's a very discrete channel along this overall concept of augmentation. So moving on to Facebook, what are its kind of motivations? Back to that construct of what's like the core business model, what's driving it, and what lessons can we take about where this is going. Facebook wants us to stay in its walled garden as long as possible, sharing media, sharing status. It sees AR as a way to essentially animate that through kind of compelling AR overlays such as AR lenses and selfie masks and a lot of the stuff that you've probably seen Snapchat do as well. It's really trying to keep us there longer with some of these animated and fun ways to share our status or the moments in our life. And those are the types of engagement KPIs that tie closely to its revenue model of advertising in an indirect way, but also in a direct way, because a lot of these kind of AR tools it's working with are very advertiser friendly. So here's an example. This is a newsfeed ad unit that they've launched recently that when you tap on it, you can, whatever that product is, this is going to be big in cosmetics and style and a lot of apparel, actually visualize the product on your face or on your body and then go right on to a transaction. So it's a full funnel ad medium that a lot of advertisers are seeing some very strong campaign results from, and it's very early. Another example is what Nike did with Facebook Messenger. So Facebook is allowing now Messenger as a channel for brands to reach their consumers directly, their existing fans, their existing customers, to give them these kind of AR-type experiences around a new product. So in this case, this was the Nike Kyrie 4 shoe drop. And it allowed kind of these fans to place a kind of podium right in front of them in their kind of immediate surroundings and literally walk around the shoe, accurately, positionally tracked, dimensionally accurate, all that, and then again, go on to buy the shoe. Amazon, very similar in terms of driving that product visualization towards commerce. Amazon's business is obviously selling us stuff. It wants AR to get us to buy more and return less, with the kind of concept of being able to better visualize whether something fits either stylistically or size-wise. And we're talking about high-margin items, home appliances. Amazon is more and more getting into selling things like flat-screen TVs. But one of the challenges is that people return them because they don't have as much of an informed purchase. This lets you see if it fits on your wall in a dimensionally accurate way. And for a company like Amazon, which operates at very thin margins, but executed at massive scale, they're very margin obsessed. So these are the types of things that are driving it to reduce those big TV returns that decimate their margins. So that's kind of their motivating factor. On to Google. So Google's core business, obviously, is search. It sees AR as a way to boost our search volume, query volume, in addition to search quality and user intent. And it's doing that by using the camera as an additional search input in addition to the search box that we traditionally use. And what its word for that is visual search, and its product Google Lens essentially lets you point your phone at any item and get an answer or a contextualized kind of overlay on top of that item. So essentially the analogy I always like to use is that the camera is the new search box, physical objects are the search terms, and these kind of overlays are the search results. Not in all cases. This isn't a silver bullet. We're still going to have mobile search, desktop search, but this kind of augments those with another channel for Google to reach us at more moments throughout the day, which is kind of their goal. And the other thing happening here, which is interesting, is that it's utilizing the camera. So it's very millennial friendly. Millennials have a high affinity for the camera. That's kind of where they live. There's also a high buying intent possible when you're talking about consumers that are right in front of your store, as opposed to at home searching for something they might do later. There's a high immediacy, there's a high user intent, and these are the types of KPIs that Google's very much looking for and what's driving them towards kind of this vision and making it happen. Taking that same concept and bringing it indoors, Google's also doing what's called a visual positioning service. So they're working with partners of theirs, such as Lowe's, to essentially get these 3D spatial maps of the building interiors and all of their product SKUs to make a search utility within the store. Again, that's a high intent use case because someone is actually within the store to be able to find a product on the shelf. It's a great use case in some of these kind of cavernous retail environments like a Lowe's or a Home Depot. And it's really the concept of something that you all are working with, which is bringing customers kind of to your doors. What about after they cross the threshold? It's a customer experience. It's increasing conversions. There are a lot of metrics that can kind of be improved through this. Now, moving on to number 4, in terms of my 5 premises, this is a good point to pause and say that a lot of the things I just went over, we're not quite there yet. There are a lot of things missing, and one of that is data and what we call the AR cloud, or what I like to call the Internet of Places. So the AR cloud is essentially a data repository that feeds information to AR devices wherever they are and allow them to do all those things we just went over. Allow them to know what they're looking at and therefore overlay the right graphic or overlay the right piece of information that's going to guide a customer through that journey. Now, one of the challenges, though, is that it's, all that data isn't available yet. The Google example I gave of the storefronts and it giving kind of information and, Yelp reviews and things like that, that's because Google, what they're doing in that case is utilizing their vast image database of Street View imagery. So they know which storefront you're looking at through object recognition and then therefore being able to provide the right information. So there are a lot of startups working on this problem by building kind of spatial maps of the world, geo-tagged information, and all that stuff to kind of bring it all together to make that happen in terms of a data backbone. And what my good industry colleague and friend Charlie Fink, he's a futurist and an author, the way he puts that is that the world will be painted with data. My analogy I like to use is that the AR cloud is like Google search index, but for the physical world. And taking that kind of analogy one step further, being kind of present in that index is going to, I think, engender kind of an offshoot or a flavor of SEO. So SEO is probably something you're all kind of involved in heavily, and all of the kind of flavors of that, reputation management, listings optimization, all of those things I think will be alive and well in this kind of visual search world, but I think they'll be even amplified. Going back to my point earlier about that consumer intent that immediacy. When someone's standing right in front of your store, you want to have that information be correct. So I think it really provides a greater impetus for all of those just being on top of your SEO game in these types of scenarios. Now, the good news is, one of my theories is that this is going to create a system where when everyone is out there performing visual searches and they're out there with their phones, holding them up to items and storefronts and other things, there's going to be the ability to create a system where they're almost like an army of digital fact checkers, where either actively or passively on an opt-in basis, they're kind of validating, that store isn't there anymore, those hours of operation aren't wrong. So I think that this overall system of visual search is also going to feed into the overall kind of SEO benefits for multi-location brands. And there's a lot of ways that's going to come together, and that's kind of very much a speculation on my part and kind of a theoretical benefit that this will all bring. But I think that the system is going to get better over time through people doing this. I like to think of it, the analogy is Waze. So Waze, of course, is a product where people utilize the content and the information while their device is also sharing back to the network all of the data that it's ingesting. So I think that's going to be one of the benefits of this kind of visual search world as it materializes and as it feeds data back and information for multi-location brands to continue to maintain and optimize all of that stuff. So this last kind of chapter of the presentation is really just to validate a point that I've probably made a few times, which is that AR is inherently local. We're talking about contextualization, graphical overlays, information overlaid on physical items. That makes it, by definition, very locally relevant, and therefore containing all of the benefits of local search in terms of user intent. I won't go through all these data exhaustively, but I will make sure that you all get this presentation if you want to go through these data points. This simply points out, these are survey data that we did with our data partner Thrive Analytics, asking consumers, what are the types of AR apps and use cases you're interested in? And besides the outlier that is games, which is kind of due to Pokemon Go, one of the most popular responses are things that are very locally oriented. City guides, in-store retail, visualizing products, some of those things I went over. So this really just validates that consumers are interested in this. So I think I'll skip over this. This is a kind of more of a macroeconomic view of kind of how this fits right in with the kind of online to offline purchase behavior. I heard that construct mentioned a lot of times yesterday. But I'll end on this. So I think everything is kind of in place in terms of the installed base of hardware, the developers that are working on this. The next thing that's bound to happen, if history is any indication, is a killer app. And we haven't seen that yet. And it's going to be exciting to see how that develops. And the thing about killer apps, if we look back to the smartphone era, iPhone killer apps took 2 to 3 years to emerge after the iPhone came out in 2007. So it wasn't until about 2009, 2010, that time frame, till we started to see things like Uber and Waze and Foursquare. And I think that the interesting thing is those apps were so far from what anyone imagined in 2007 when the iPhone came out, or in 2008 when the App Store came out. And I think AR, that killer app, that eventual killer app, I think is going to be far from what anyone imagined in 2017 when Apple's ARKit came out and that developer ecosystem first started to kick off. And there are going to be lots of killer apps in the gaming world and in other things, but within this topic of local search, local discovery, I think it's prime for something that is going to be very popular and therefore very much a channel that you can all use. And now's the time to start thinking about it, how that might apply, how your data, how your current multi-location marketing, how your SEO kind of will apply to that world. So that's it for me. Like I said, there's some data in here that I have as kind of leave behinds. I have a video that goes through a lot of this stuff that I won't play now, but these are all kinds of other data points that hopefully are valuable to you all. So it looks like based on this timer, I have a minute left. Is that correct?
Awesome. So we have time for Keith. I knew you'd have a question for us.
Yeah, I guess my struggle with Yelp came out with Monocle.
Yeah, good point.
And I know you had
Good morning. Yelp came out with Monocle years ago.
Yeah.
And great tool. It just exactly shows what you just showed. So I guess my point is, I saw the slide, and yeah, Pokemon Go and gaming, I get all that. I guess in terms of, hey, I'm interested versus application and use are two different things. And so what have we learned from Monocle with Yelp that's been there for a long time, and why should we really believe that, hey, this really is
like why now? Why now is it going to work? It's a good question. I like to look at Yelp's Monocle as kind of the Apple Newton of AR. Technology history shows us there are a lot of devices that come out, fall flat, and then several years later they really hit. And I think they really hit because the technology advances, the world is ready for them. There's a lot of evidence of those things lining up, those factors in AR, such as ARKit and AR Core, providing a tool set for developers to do things that are actually compelling. I think Yelp Monocle, I used it a few times, and it back in those times I was very interested. It just didn't work. There wasn't the, if you pulled up Yelp Monocle right now and pulled it around, you would see all the restaurants within a 2-mile radius that look like they're right here, right here, right here. So the positional tracking, the technology, all of that, and just that snowballing along with the developers being able to not have to build a homegrown version of AR, as Yelp did in that case, but having a developer kit that's ready to go. So on the developer side, the barriers have gone down. That's starting to kind of feed into that chicken and egg scenario where consumers are getting more interested. Then there's a big enough consumer base of using that, and then other developers are interested. So it's kind of that escalation that you see sometimes in tech revolutions that takes several Yelp Monocles, several kind of development cycles, several iterations to really hit. And I think that, back to the question of why now, why this time, like Yelp Monocle failed, it's a great point. But I think a lot of those factors have kind of shot us towards this really materializing in the near term.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I saw Manish grab the cube. Did you have a question?
No, I was just waiting for if anyone else did. If not, Mike, there's several people in the room that are not retail. So healthcare, moving companies, manufacturing companies. Does that mean what your examples were, that maybe that doesn't apply, and the timeline for those types of organizations are even shifted further out?
I think it could be sooner, and it depends if we're talking about AR as a marketing vehicle or AR as an operational tool. As an operational tool, this isn't something I went to at all. This is a whole different presentation, but in terms of doctors using AR to be able to, during surgery, be hands-free and have that intelligence layer of information that helps them, guides them through surgery reference material in a manufacturing context. Having a remote expert instead of when a machine breaks, having to fly them out and the latency of machine downtime plus the travel cost, to be able to have a subject matter expert remotely do the see what I see functionality, which is through a set of AR glasses like the HoloLens, be able to see the broken machine part, be able to make annotations, pull that lever, do that screw, and to be able to have that kind of remote assistance or automated pre-authored AR overlays to be able to assist through kind of all kinds of operational, whether it be in a manufacturing industrial sense, whether it be in medicine. You can picture that working in a lot of ways to just basically create a lot more operational efficiencies, which equals cost savings. So there's that whole branch of AR that I didn't even go into. With those types of verticals, with marketing, it depends on what their strategies are in terms of kind of getting people in the door. And there are ways that this will develop, I believe. It'll be more suited to some verticals versus others, but I think that it'll be kind of, at least have some broad applicability to lots of different verticals.
Awesome. Great question. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.